So almost exactly 40 years ago, I was spending my days in little cafes in Berkeley, California, writing my dissertation, the title of which was An Application of Unsupervised Neural Networks in the Identification of Structure in Personality Data. And it was absolutely as mind-numbing as it sounds. What it was really about is how we as human beings categorize things in the world. In the case of the research I did, it was about how it is that we categorize and say, this woman is introverted and this man is extroverted. It's about how we discern differences in personality. It is absolutely human and, in fact, essential for us to divide the world up into categories of various kinds. The problem is that it does not go far enough. There is also an underlying reality, a reality that says we are highly interconnected and that we are part of one another and part of God. When we just dwell in that part that is about categorizing everything, it's very easy to get drawn into the kind of negative discourse that seems to be flooding our country lately. So knowing that, even 40 years ago, I slipped into the front pages of my dissertation, a page that had a passage from Hindu scripture. It was written in Sanskrit, which is probably how I got away with putting it in my dissertation. The translation is roughly this: salutations to the grace that leads us from darkness to light, whose only form is truth, and by whose knowledge this world will no longer be perceived to be divided by differences. A grace that gives us access to this underlying reality of the interconnection of all of creation. This is accessible to every one of us, but it has been my observance over the years that those who particularly focus on the practices of prayer and meditation in order to improve their conscious contact with God tend to more often than not have spiritual experiences of a oneness with God or a oneness with creation, experiences that an old spiritual director of mine used to call kingdom experiences. Once we've had a glimpse of that, we can't unknow it. And it changes who we are, and it changes how we function in the world. So to the passage that we were reading today, what God is calling us to do there, love our enemies. Also in this passage, it says explicitly, so that we may be children of God. And then in the end of the passage, that we may be perfect as God is perfect. It gets translated, this word perfect. I think it's not a great translation. The Greek word is teleos, and it means to be whole or to be complete or to be integrated. Jesus calls us to act from God's perspective, to be a child of God, to have the perfection of God, so that we see from God's perspective the interconnectedness of all that there is, and we become part of that unity. We become whole. There's another passage where Jesus addresses this from a slightly different angle in John 17. Jesus is praying for his disciples, and therefore praying for us. And his prayer is this: that all of them may be one, Father, just as you are in me and I am in you. May they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. I have given them the glory that you gave me, that they may be one as we are one, I in them and you in me, so that they may be brought into complete unity. Paul also had a similar understanding. He called it being in the mind of Christ. And so in Galatians, you hear this passage: there is no longer Jew or Greek, there is no longer slave or free, there is no longer male and female, for all of you are one in Jesus Christ. These teachings about hating our enemy, they are not teachings that say we have to ignore evil. We have a moral obligation to try and stand in the way of evil when we encounter it. But the truth is, especially around the application of these teachings, is that for most of us, most of the time, what it's really about is being very annoyed at the driver who just cut us off, or the co-worker who we just really don't think we can stand another day of working with, or one of our relatives who offended us deeply in some way, shape, or form. And it is still a very hard teaching, even in that kind of a form, because it is very human for us to hate our enemy, or those at least we perceive as being an enemy. And so again, we are being asked to do something very difficult and against human nature. And we are being asked to do it precisely so that we can move closer to God, that we can be one with God, and that we can see this underlying reality that we are all connected to one another. And therefore, to hate someone else is to hate ourselves. Another thing about these glimpses that we begin to have, these kingdom experiences, is as we have those glimpses, we begin to transform. We don't see the world in the same way anymore. And as we transform, the world begins to transform. And we begin to enact the kingdom of heaven on earth. I want to close with a saying from the Gospel of Thomas. I've mentioned this gospel before. It's not in the New Testament. It was written roughly at the same time as the Gospels of the New Testament. It's comprised of 114 sayings by Jesus. Some of them would sound very familiar because we hear very similar things in the Gospels of the New Testament. Others sound frankly much more mystical, and this is one of those. It's saying 22. Jesus said to them, "When you make the two one, when you make the outside like the inside, and the inside like the outside, and the upper as the lower, then you will enter the kingdom."